One day in 1975, I found myself standing alone in the control tower at RAF Biggin Hill, responsible for the radios of the entire Battle of Britain Memorial Airshow. Now that wasn't supposed to happen, because I was young, barely out of training, still trying to look as though I knew what I was doing, and somehow everyone else had disappeared. Now, if you don't know Biggin Hill, during the summer of 1940, this was one of the most important fighter stations in Britain. Spitfires and Hurricanes launched from there to defend the country during the Battle of Britain, and every year there was a memorial air show, a celebration, a remembrance, a living piece of history. The control tower had spent the previous 11 months being used as a children's play school. I'm serious. The cranes were still there. Tiny chairs, finger painting, bits of coloured paper. And our job was to turn it back into a fully functioning military air traffic control tower before the air show began. Simple enough. At least, that's what we thought. 6 of us arrived. An admin officer, a warrant officer, chief technician, a corporal, myself, and another young junior technician. At first, everything looked straightforward. The radios were downstairs in the equipment room. The control panels were upstairs in the tower itself. A few cables, a few antennas, a few checks. Nothing dramatic. Then the collapse began. The other junior technician disappeared first after being caught yet again repairing his motorcycle instead of doing the installation. Back to base he went. Then the admin officer got called away. Then the corporal, the man who actually knew the installation, was assigned somewhere else entirely, I think Cyprus. Then the chief technician received notice of a hospital appointment he'd been waiting months for. Perfectly fair, terrible timing. And suddenly there were only 2 of us left. A warrant officer whose expertise was administration, and me. At that moment we realised something horrifying. There were no replacements. None. Every available radio technician was already deployed somewhere else. And suddenly the entire communications system for the Battle of Britain Memorial Air Show depended on one nervous young technician trying desperately not to look terrified. I remember looking around the room and thinking, surely there must be somebody else. There wasn't. The warrant officer looked at me and asked, "Tom, can you do it?" Which, in military language, for, "If you can't, we're finished." The next morning, the radio equipment itself arrived. Brand new, factory sealed, pristine condition, which sounded encouraging. Until we noticed that on the crates the radio equipment was stored in, it was stamped 1944. The warrant officer went pale. To him, it looked as though we were just about to run Britain's most important memorial air show using museum exhibits. But privately, I was less worried, because as a radio amateur, I already used surplus military radio equipment from the same era. To me, it actually looked rather familiar. So I smiled confidently and said, "No problem." Instead, of course, I was praying. The warrant officer was actually wonderful. He openly admitted that he knew absolutely nothing about radio installation, but told me, "Whatever you need, I'll help." And to his enormous credit, he did. He carried equipment, pulled cables, fetched tools, ran messages. Meanwhile, I installed radios, mounted racks, connected control panels, and slowly tried to turn children's classrooms back into military communication systems. By some miracle, it all began working. Almost. There was just one small issue. No audio coming from the tower, which was slightly unfortunate for air traffic control, and even worse, every transmission legally had to be recorded. 2 brand new tape machines had been delivered for the job, both dead. At this point, I remember briefly thinking, not my problem, but of course it was my problem. So I started tracing circuits. Hours passed. Eventually, I discovered the real fault. The tape recorders themselves were dragging down the audio lines. The system needed modification immediately. So I handed the warrant officer a parts list and sent him on a 120-mile round trip to RAF Henlow. And somewhere during that moment I realised something rather absurd. I was now directing a man 4 ranks above me, and I was still a junior wet behind the ears, and he accepted it perfectly calmly. He returned with the parts. I fitted them, switched everything back on, and suddenly the entire system came alive, just in time. The airshow went ahead flawlessly, and I'll never forget standing there hearing the radios crackling with voices while Spitfires rode overhead. At one point, a Messerschmitt Bf 108 in full wartime German markings swept across the airfield with a Spitfire behind it, and honestly, it gave me a lump in the throat, because for a few moments history didn't feel distant anymore. It felt alive. A few days later, back at base, I was suddenly ordered to report to headquarters. Now in the RAF, that usually means one thing: you're in trouble. I spent the entire walk there mentally replaying every mistake I might possibly have made. Had I damaged something, broken protocol, insulted somebody important? I walked into the office. Squadron commander was there. Warrant officer, chief technician, everyone, all staring at me. My stomach dropped. Then the commanding officer smiled and said, "For virtually saving the Battle of Britain Memorial Airshow, you've been recommended for accelerated promotion." I honestly didn't know what to say, because I never felt heroic. Mostly, I felt terrified. But looking back now, sometimes in life, you discover there's nobody else left. And whether you feel ready or not, you simply have to continue. And that's how a young junior technician with a screwdriver, some old radios, and an alarming amount of blind optimism accidentally saved the Battle of Britain Memorial Airshow in 1975.